this is it. 42 years, 5 movies, and a whole bunch of melted faces later, the big screen adventures of Dr. Henry Jones Jr. are finally drawing to a close with this summer's Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. By the time the curtain is closed, George Lucas and Steven Spielberg's pulpy adventure serial-inspired series is sure to go down as one of the most iconic to have graced the silver screen, having cemented Harrison Ford's legacy as one of the greatest actors of his generation, and Spielberg one of its greatest directors. But how does the series shape up overall? Yep, it's time to crack those whips and don your fave fedora. I'm Ewan, this is What Culture, and here is every Indiana Jones movie ranked. Number 5. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Although certainly not unfeasible, the idea of making an Indiana Jones movie without the involvement of either George Lucas or Steven Spielberg is an odd one. While Spielberg and Lucas were initially involved in the making of the 5th Indiana Jones, both stepped aside at various points during pre-production, with Ford v Ferrari director James Mangold stepping in to direct, as well as rewrite David Koepp's screenplay with Jez and John Henry Butterworth in 2020. The end result, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, sadly lacks any of the charm or drive of Spielberg and Lucas's originals. Whereas still is that it ends the franchise on an oddly dispiriting note. Dial of Destiny is arguably the most introspective Indiana Jones installment yet, starring a near 80-year-old Harrison Ford as the character reckons with his twilight years, and surprisingly, given Kingdom of the Crystal Skull's ending, the rubble of a life he has now been left with. Much of the runtime of Dial is spent with Indy having suffered a grave emotional burden, and it's one he never truly overcomes despite the ostensibly happy note it's meant to conclude on. Mangold's film undoes Kingdom's affectionate conclusion and leaves Indy with nothing but ruins to sift through. Now, there are some positives. The ever-reliable Mads Mikkelsen turns in a great performance as the spectre of Nazism, Jürgen Voller, and there are moments where the film finds a compelling footing by diving into Operation Paperclip, the US scheme that recruited Nazi scientists following the conclusion of World War II. But any fun or narrative intrigue to be derived here is completely crushed by Dial's depressing approach to growing old, as well as a frustratingly smug turn from Phoebe Waller-Bridge as Indy's goddaughter, Helena Shaw. Look, closing the book on one of cinema's most beloved ever series was always going to be a tall order. It's just bizarre that out of all the different approaches that could have been taken here, Dial opts to be miserable instead. Number 4. Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is a good movie, and one that, in the wake of Dial of Destiny, surely deserves greater reappraisal. Spielberg's 4th Indy movie has historically been criticized for not keeping in with the spirit of its predecessors, taking on a sci-fi bent and abandoning the mysticism that Raiders introduced in 1981. But here's the thing, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull couldn't be more indie if it tried. Of course, an Indiana Jones movie set in the late 1950s would lean into Cold War science fiction. It was the era of Roswell, and sci-fi was a massive draw in fiction across film, television, and comics. Indiana Jones has always been a loving homage to adventure serials. If the character was to be situated in the 1950s, then it would make perfect sense for an adventure to reflect the space age and Cold War espionage. The truth is that aliens are just at home in the series as the spirits of Raiders or the mystical cult of Temple of Doom. To ignore that aspect would have been a waste of the setting. And to be blunt for a moment, the conversation surrounding the 4th Indy film has been kinda tedious, led by reductive jibes that have dismissed its technical and narrative accomplishments, as well as its obvious flaws. So what if Indy escaped a nuke in a fridge? Is the image of Ford staring up at the apocalyptic fury of a new age not cool as hell? Reiterating grievances with the fridge scene and the aliens distracts from worthwhile critiques on what the film does and doesn't do well, and as David Elric surmised in an excellent Dial of Destiny review for IndieWire, may have had the adverse effect of driving Spielberg away from the director's chair on the 5th entry. Now, there is stuff that's wrong with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, particularly when it comes to its use of CGI in key action set pieces, but it's kinetic in a way only Spielberg's films are. Certainly less refined than its predecessors, but far from the steep departure consensus has indicated. Number 3. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Released in 1989, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade marked a return to the formula of Raiders of the Lost Ark after the controversial Temple of Doom, bringing back the original's globe-trotting vibes, the Nazi bad guys, and a powerful Judeo-Christian artifact for Jones to battle for. While its reiterative qualities are mildly disappointing, The Last Crusade boasts a secret weapon that near enough dispels any doubts over its direction: Sean Connery, who was cast perfectly against type as the bookish and distant Dr. Henry Jones Sr. It's just mythic dad movie cinema. The Last Crusade is the safest and most indulgent of Spielberg and Lucas's original trilogy, but it also boasts a strong emotional core, the best action set pieces in the series, Williams' most enchanting compositions on Indy, and one of the hardest match cuts ever, where young River Phoenix Indy transitions into a bloodied but defiant Harrison Ford. Along with Raiders of the Lost Ark and Temple of Doom, The Last Crusade is a wonderful film, and for the longest time was actually my favorite of the series. It remains the most rewatchable, I think, due to its easygoing approach and that beautiful Ford-Connery dynamic, but there is a part of me that wonders what it may have looked like had Temple been looked upon more kindly when it released. The Last Crusade is still highly entertaining, don't get me wrong, in many ways the pinnacle of Spielberg's blockbuster abilities alongside Jurassic Park, and I would dread to lose that beautiful father-son story it gave us, but it feels safe in a way the previous two indie movies didn't. Let's be real though, nothing beats that tank sequence. Number 2. Raiders of the Lost Ark, the film that started it all. It's no surprise that Raiders of the Lost Ark spawned an entire franchise from Indiana Jones' debut adventure. Lucas and Spielberg introduced the character of Indy perfectly, right down to the first few frames of the film. The introductory temple sequence of Raiders is a thing of beauty and enshrines almost every facet of Indiana Jones' character, from the moment he steps out of the shadows with his steely glare, to the panic expression of triggering the temple's traps, the exasperation of being outmaneuvered by Balak, and the anger of having to put up with jock snakes as he makes his getaway. There is no better character introduction than Raiders, and it's a strong foundation Spielberg and Lucas build on to legendary effect. The first Indiana Jones film is brimming with affection for the form and its history, most obviously and notably the adventure serials the two filmmakers grew up watching, but it's also a reminder of Spielberg's talent as an innovator. Raiders is also beautifully composed by the director and cinematographer Douglas Slocum, who build up a breathless pace as Indy and Old Flame Marion Ravenwood, played by a terrific Karen Allen, race against time to retrieve the Ark of the Covenant before it can fall into the hands of the Third Reich. Top it off with yet another legendary score from composer John Williams, and you're left with mythic cinema. There are moments where Raiders lags, particularly in the final act before that face melter of a closing scene, but it's still a glorious debut for Dr. Jones. And number 1, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Oh boy, I can hear the cultists chanting right now. Although often considered the weakest installment in Spielberg's original trilogy, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom remains one of the director's most visually impressive and visceral works. A superb horror show that indulges in the series' adventure serial inspirations in the best, most nastiest way. A prequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark, Temple of Doom sees Harrison Ford's eponymous explorer on a quest to recover a Sankara stone from a murderous thuggy cult in India. Along for the ride are Short Round, Indy's orphan sidekick played to perfection by a young Ke Kwan, and Billy Scott, played by Kate Capshaw, a famous American singer operating in Shanghai who tags along almost by accident. Whereas the 4 other Indiana Jones films are all globe-trotting adventures, Temple takes place in just 2 locations. We're treated to a glorious opening set piece at the Club Obi-Wan in Shanghai, before then spending the remainder of the runtime in Mayapur and Pankot Palace, the so-called Temple of Doom from the film's titles. This isn't a negative though. By rooting the bulk of the Temple of Doom in Pankot, Spielberg is able to marinate the film in dread, having Indy and company navigate the labyrinthine passages of the palace before unearthing the real horror of the thuggy cult's lair. It's understandable why Temple's darker instincts proved jarring when it was first released, but the second Indiana Jones film is truly magnificent and, from a visual and set design point of view at the very least, a series high point. It should earn that plaudit for the Anything Goes number alone in the opening. It's a truly gorgeous effort. Spielberg and cinematographer Slocum capture the twilight with a fantastic mix of matte paintings and wide-angle lenses, aided excellently by the visual artists at Industrial Light and Magic. Pancart's interiors are also completely mind-blowing in their scale and grandeur, whether it's the sacrificial chamber or the mines where Mayapur's children endlessly toil. Temple of Doom is more than just a visual showpiece though, and despite its darker inflections, this is an Indiana Jones movie with truckloads of heart, exemplified best by Quan's performance as Short Round. We may be introduced to Indiana through Fortune and Glory Kid, but after that opening, Temple of Doom turns into a great big romantic battle for survival and humanity. It speaks to the heart of Indy, as well as the dark, sometimes ugly roots of his inspirations, which is why it remains one of Spielberg's most compelling efforts, as well as Indiana Jones's greatest adventure. And there you have it, that was every Indiana Jones movie ranked. I would like to reiterate for the umpteenth time that I actually love this series, and the difference between the top three is very, very marginal. I love them all, and I also love to read other people's indie rankings, so post them down there if you haven't already, as I enjoy seeing what everyone's favorite is. Drop the video a like if you enjoyed it, and subscribe for more if you haven't already. Otherwise, I've been Ewan, thank you for watching What Culture, and I'll hopefully catch you next time. Bye!